Josh, if you want to hit record, there we go. All right, welcome everyone to our 7th annual SAP District Council Conference. My name is Michelle Paulus. I'm a school counselor at Manheim Township High School and the SAP District Council Conference Chair. Along with me today, we have from our committee, Susan Billy, who's Manager of Behavioral Health Support Services and PNSAS Region 2 Coordinator at the IU, Josh Mounts, Prevention Specialist at Compass Mark, and Carrie Heinze, who is a social worker from Manheim Central. This year, in true COVID fashion, we have had to adapt our format for this conference to hopefully better meet the needs of our attendees. Today is the first of 4 virtual mini sessions that we'll be offering on topics of particular relevance this year as we navigate this pandemic as a community. Registration is still open for the subsequent sessions, and you can see that information on your screen. I will also add the registration link, which you can also see on the screen, into the chat if that's easier. Please know that this session is being recorded and it will be shared out along with the presentation and the evaluation by the end of this week. The evaluation must be completed in order to earn Act 48 or social work credits. There will be time for question and answer at the end of the presentation, so please don't hesitate to utilize the chat feature for this purpose. So without further ado, Susan, let's introduce our speaker for today.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. We have with us today Maegan Bregenser. She's a service coordinator at Insight PI Cyber Charter School. And she is the SAP coordinator, the homeless liaison, the foster liaison, the RTII and MTSS coordinator, and crisis coordinator. In addition to this, she's taught as an adjunct faculty member at Carlow University and Westmoreland County Community College for the English and Communications departments. She's worked for 16 years in a virtual setting after working for 12 years in brick and mortar schools. She's here today to share her knowledge with us on how to successfully implement SAP services in a virtual setting. So welcome, Maegan. We're so glad to have you. We will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm very grateful to be here. And I hope that we're able to work together a little bit and help out with everything that's been going on here in this crazy world. So hopefully you guys can see my screen. Can I get a nod if everyone can see? Great, thank you. I was asked to talk a bit about how to handle SAP in a virtual world and basically, you know, norming things in an uncharted territory, because this is an uncharted territory. And I think it's important in starting out to put that out there. I oftentimes use the analogy that, you know, brick and mortar schools that have been pushed into this virtual world could be like the state champion football team. They could be the Super Bowl team, the winners of the Super Bowl team, which I have to tell you, I'm from Pittsburgh, this year is not us. But in any event, you could be the best football team out there. And basically what happened was you guys were lifted up and asked to play on a baseball field. So you were tossed into this environment where you have amazing players, amazing staff, amazing coaches, but you were thrown into a different field. On top of which, in the stands, you didn't have people who signed up to be in the football team. You didn't have people who signed up to watch a baseball game. You had people who signed up to go to hockey practice and to be part of a hockey team and to watch a hockey game. So not only are you shoved into a different arena, you have constituents like your parents who were not prepared to be in this venue either. So basically, you're being asked to kick a field goal across the second baseline while everyone in the stands is screaming they didn't get a hat trick. So being aware of that is something I think is important for you all. So this is who I am. Excuse me. That's my family. I love Ina Garden. I'm a big cook. That's my oldest. I have 5 kids. He's a zoologist, so that's a snow leopard. So we do all kinds of weird animal stuff. But that's basically who I am, and I think that's already been covered, so I'm going to scooch on past that one. And talk a bit about how to create some norms. So there's 2 things we're going to talk about. One we're going to talk about is just how to kind of set the venue in a virtual world. And the second one is how to enact SAP supports and services within that venue. So just like in your classroom, whenever you have your classroom rules, you have your classroom decorum and your classroom settings. It's very important that you set those rules and settings within the virtual world as well. Kids don't know what they're allowed to do in a classroom setting online, because if they're in a normal chat room or doing things online at home, not a lot of rules. I mean, they kind of interact with each other and say things, how to participate in chat, when to have your mute on, when to have your mic on, how to do all these different kinds of things become a really big parameter in controlling and containing any possible difficulties you might have. So all participants need to understand what appropriate attire is for being online, what appropriate background attire is. I said I oftentimes use virtual backgrounds, mostly because that way if one of my kids does run behind us, they can't see that. It's kind of a trick we can use, but it's something you can share with your parents as well. We'll talk a bit about why that might be helpful in a bit. Making sure everybody understands those protocols for speaking, technology, and all those types of things, because it does make an impact in what you're going to be seeing. The other thing we need to recognize here is that when you are in this virtual world, you're seeing into people's homes. I mean, there's certain things you see in the school setting, but when you're actually seeing into people's homes and you see what's going on behind you, you see what's on the walls, what's happening, it gives you a very different viewpoint and something you need to make sure your staff is prepared for. So when we are interacting with a student in a classroom, here's what we're hoping to see over here, this lovely little desk, a nice little clean setting. But in reality, we probably see the other side with the kid in the dryer and everything else. And I have to say, I can give you direct experience. My oldest child's best friend, when they were in 3rd grade, shut himself in a dryer. So been there, done that. So you do see this kind of thing, and you have to look and recognize what's going on, because the fact is, you're jumping, not only are you now jumping into people's homes, but people weren't prepared to have you in your home. You know, they were not really ready to be working from home with all the kids and the relatives and the dog and everything else. So that level of chaos may just be a COVID chaos. It may not be an actual world chaos. Go to the next slide. So what is it that we should be looking for? What we need to be really paying attention for are, and we'll go over a couple of these a few times, is when you have kids on camera, if that's a choice you've made. Not everyone chooses to go on camera, and we'll talk a bit about that as well. You want to look for those chronic absences. You want to look for lack of coursework, the kind of things you always look for. Changes in environment, changes in conversation, personal hygiene concerns, odd behaviors, change in affect, any of those kind of things, unexplained illnesses that you would normally be looking for as a trigger that there may be a SAP issue going on here. Concerning behaviors in a typical school surrounding are things you can see in reality. Now we're flipping that around and we're looking at it in a virtual reality. And just like the kid in the dryer, we have to remember that we're seeing a window into people's lives that they really weren't prepared for us to share. So one of the things that I ask people to do is to try to go into this with the best intention possible. Go into this assuming goodwill. I can tell you I have 5 kids, so there's been many a time that my house looks like a bomb went off in it. It's complete and total chaos, and one kid's yelling at the other, and the dog's barking, and the doorbell rang. So now everything's yelling, and I'm hitting all the mute buttons, and I have a smoke detector in my kitchen that every time someone makes bacon sets a fire alarm off. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's happening. So if you hear people snapping or growling or, you know, seems upset or chaotic, it might just be that they've been thrown into this COVID world and they're not quite ready for it. When you're seeing it consistently, when you're seeing things that are highly concerning, that's when we want to really start to worry about things and kind of keep an eye out. So things that we need to think about for mandated reporter status are things when we see bruising, when we see marks, when we see children that are acting very apprehensive. The other deal is when kids are in a classroom, in a live classroom with you guys, there's no one beside them. They don't have to monitor their speech. They don't have to worry about who's seeing them, who's watching them, how they're responding. So you want to listen very closely for canned answers. You want to think about it if you're hearing very controlled or very, muted responses. So those are kind of things that are a red flag. That may mean, again, the smoke detector is going off because someone made bacon, or it may mean something else is going on. But you really do have to be rather vigilant and rather diligent as well when you're paying attention to these kind of things, especially that overly compliant child who in your classroom was not overly compliant. Always, we keep in mind that as mandated reporters, we do need to respond. That is a live link, if you have the PowerPoint, to the child abuse hotline that is for mandated reporters. So you can go ahead and put that through. Again, here's the phone number, 800-932-0313. So always, always, always act out. I know a lot of times, and oftentimes whenever I'm working with new staff members, there's the question of, well, you know, I don't want to cause a problem. I don't want to be seen as, you know, tattletale. I also, what if I'm wrong? You know, what if I say I'm wrong and I made a report and I was wrong? You know, there was bacon burning and that's what was happening. That's a good day. I mean, that's a really good day. You know, honestly, if something comes into a child line and they don't have a problem, that's always a good answer. So it's always better to assume that you're right and make the report and not take the chance than it is to assume that you're wrong and something can happen. Because if you are wrong, it's always a positive. And if you're right, you know you're helping support a family. So what if we do see concerns that might need some SAP intervention, some things that we normally do? Well, hopefully you don't do like this lady is doing and freak out and have your hair going all over the place and lose it. I also hope you don't put your head in a hole like an ostrich and kind of look away and hope that you're not seeing what you're seeing or what isn't happening. Because neither one of those is very effective or very helpful. So what do? We do the same thing you will always do. Anything you would have done in a classroom setting or in a live brick and mortar is what you're going to do in a virtual setting. You're just going to do it in a different place. So how do you make a SAP referral in a virtual setting? The easiest thing to do is to use a Google form or a Smartsheet form. I don't know which one you're more familiar with or more comfortable with, but just do it online instead of doing it live. You still do the same thing where you send out the consents to the parents. I'll talk a little bit about consent options for you. You then hold your virtual meeting like you would hold an in-person meeting. Have your discussions, gather information, see what you can find out about the family or the child or the situation. Connect them with those internal resources that you can offer within the school setting. And that might be a one-on-one Zoom meeting with the school counselor or a virtual support group or a virtual small group meeting. Whatever it is, it's the same thing you always do. You're just doing it in a different way. And obviously connecting to outside services. And then you monitor, follow up, and keep an eye on things to see what you can do to help. Couple tricks of the trade here. Getting signatures. I strongly suggest HelloSign. DocuSign works. Adobe Sign usually requires people have an Adobe account, and a lot of people don't. The reason I like HelloSign so much is because you can use it on your cell phone very simplistically. DocuSign oftentimes gets a bit wonky. You know, you have to like spread it out and sometimes you can't see it. So if you have parents that are struggling a bit with interacting, how to deal with things online, how to get involved online, HelloSign's just an easier, more comfortable setting for more different arenas. How do you then monitor and follow up? How do you handle those things? First thing I would like to stress to you is set a schedule in multiple venues. So email the family with some time options, call them on the phone with time options, text them with time options, set it up for a specific time. Because again, you have families with parents who are working from home, parents who are struggling with caregivers in their house while they're out working. You have kids, you know, in 3 different schools, maybe an elementary, a middle, a high school at 3 different times on 3 different computers, all at the kitchen table. So setting up that actual time to talk is hugely helpful. Things you have to remember too, whenever you're trying to get a hold of parents, especially if you have any parents that may be dealing like, unfortunately, the vast majority of us right now, with some limited income options is if they are using any kind of government action phone, if they're using any of the Comcast Internet Essentials, they may have some limited access, any of those types of things, the end of the month isn't going to work. At the end of the month, that's when everybody's out of minutes. So if you're scheduling something for this week, you're most likely not going to get an answer. Texting is oftentimes much more helpful. We use a lot of Google Text because that will allow me to use my work phone and not my personal cell phone, which I never use. So if you're using that, what that allows people to do is to use different kinds of internet texting options to text in and get information. So frequently, if we have families that we aren't able to reach by email, by a phone, the texting option is usually something that works because they're not getting charged for it if they're using any of those online text-in options. So I have a strong suggestion to use that for you. Also remember, privacy is a challenge. Privacy is a challenge in my house in general, but I mean, privacy whenever you're having any kind of a private conversation and everybody's there is hard. So if you're trying to talk to the student, you may want to start with saying, you know, do you have your headset on? Can people hear me? You know, can people hear you? Are you comfortable with that? Do I need to let you go somewhere else? Do I need to call you back at a different time? If you're speaking with a parent, same thing. You know, they may not want to disclose things about one child in front of all the other kids that are there or anything else that's happening. So being aware of the fact that they're not in an office or sitting in your office or sitting in the privacy of your classroom really kind of helps to temper how you can interact with them and the information you're able to share and discuss. Ask a lot of questions. I mean, you have to ask. If you don't ask, you're not going to know. And especially if you have people that you're having difficulty getting in a face-to-face where you can see expression or any kind of an affect, the more you ask, the more you find out. I tend to be very careful to ask things that are only within the parameters of things I can respond to. And I ask very open-ended general questions like, how's it going? You know, or what's happening? Or, hey, you know what? Leah hasn't been coming to class. She usually did. You know, since you guys have gone online, I've noticed that we only see Leah at 10 o'clock. Morning's a bit tough. What's going on? How can I help? You know, make that assumption. They may have 3 preschoolers at home, all of whom need fed and diapers changed and out the door so mom can work with this kid. So you may just have to realize that Leah's not coming to school till 9:30 instead of 9 o'clock and see how you can work around that. So some of those things only come about whenever you open the door for those questions. Pay attention to any of those signs. Again, I know I'm harping on abuse, but we are seeing, as I'm sure you're all very aware, an incredible rise in abuse throughout the country, and let alone the state, because children aren't able to escape their abusers now. They're all trapped in the house. Victims are not able to escape it because they're all quarantined together. So please keep an eye out and observe that environment, observe the things we talked about if we're looking for any kind of abuse. And look for some of these mental health symptoms. Yes, you can see them in the virtual classroom. Yes, you can hear it when you're speaking to people. You know this, whenever you're on the phone with your family, your friends, or your kids, usually within the first 2 words, you know something's up. You can hear it in what's going on. Pay attention. 1 in 5 children had mental health conditions before the global pandemic, before this giant economic crash. And 70 to 80% of them didn't get that treatment. That's one of the most big blessings, I guess most big is a word I just made up, but biggest blessing that the SAP program does is it allows us to give those families the connections they need to ensure children get all the supports that they need. So keep an eye out for the different kinds of symptoms you'll see in that virtual classroom. Difficulty focusing, hyperactive, always looking up, checking different ideas. Just keep an eye out for what you would normally see. Trust your instincts. You know, I always say that if your gut tells you something, it's probably correct. So if you see something's going on, you think there's a problem, go with your instincts that there's a problem, but also temper your instincts to not assume it's a nefarious one. Because again, it could be burning bacon in the kitchen, setting off the fire alarms. It doesn't necessarily mean someone's lighting a fire. So if you think there's a problem, you're probably correct, but try to keep your parameters open to allow for what may be causing that. And those standard metrics are usually what work in any venue: attendance, work completion, body language, all that kind of stuff. Be intentional. Again, few simple but very direct questions. How's everybody feeling? Emojis are huge. Kids love emojis. So emojis are a really big option to be using in different places. We don't teach in Zoom. We teach in Neuro or in BBC. So it gives us a lot more options for whiteboards, for interactions, for sharing documents and sharing screens. But Zoom, I know a lot of people are using Zoom and Teams. They both have tons of emojis, of whiteboard choices, of different things you can upload. So allow the kids to do that and kind of get those quick monitors on how everybody's feeling, how everybody's doing. You can also do some different things in Google Sheets where the kids can log in. You can say, okay, here's the link for Google Sheet. Everybody log in and give me how you're feeling. It does come privately, so the kid doesn't have to worry about other people seeing it. And they can give you a quick, smiley, frowny, whatever they're feeling for that day kind of emoji. So you get a gauge on where your kids are. Communicate, communicate, communicate. What we always tease people about in the virtual world is we are nags. We are the world's biggest nags. If we don't hear from you, we are nagging you. We're calling, we're texting, we're emailing, we're robocalling, we're snail mailing. Pre-COVID, we're showing up at your door. We have home visitors who come and knock on the door and say, hey, where you been? What's going on? So all kinds of things that can happen and zip around there. So I cannot stress that anyone who says, well, I'm not real big on emailing, recognize your parents may not be either, and do it anyhow. Get it out there, get the calls going, because that's what needs to be done. How do we engage our parents and our families? Because the thing is about in the virtual world, whenever you're teaching or you have a child who's intentionally attending school virtually, it was because the parents wanted that. The parents signed up to be a partner. They signed up to be there and commit to sitting beside the child, working with the school, working with the teachers, working with their students. That was a choice they made. It was an option. You guys kind of got dumped into it, and all of your parents got dumped to it. They're the hockey fans that are sitting there in the baseball field wondering why there's a football team. That's what we're looking at. So when we're talking about parent engagement, here's some things that I can suggest that may be helpful to you so you can get them into that SAP process and help them out. One of the things we do is we guide them through the territory. We do a week to 2 weeks of orientation at the beginning, one set for parents, one set for students, one set together. So it's shocking in 2021, but there's a lot of people who don't know how to email. They don't know how to open attachments. I think it's Geico is doing these commercials now where it's a guy saying, I'm teaching you how to not be your parents. And they're all like, this is an Adobe file. And everyone's like, oh no. And there's a girl with the fanny pack. And that's more real than we think. So if we're sending information out to parents and they're not responding, they might not even know it's there. So it's important that you have that kind of an orientation for students to show them how to use the system, orientation for parents to teach them how you're going to interact with them, and then one together so everybody knows what's happening. We also have monthly initiatives where we say, okay, how many times have we reached parents this month? Okay, in your classroom of 40 kids, how many parents have you interacted with this month? Okay, which ones didn't we? How do we help with that? What do we need to do to make sure that they're coming on board and we have some kind of connection? And how does that go? We also have lots of parent groups. So we try to do things that are both academic for parents that are more school focused, but some that are just purely social because it's a pandemic and people are lonely and they're bored. So if we can get them to interact together from our setting, then that's going to have them connect more with us as a school and be more supportive of their children. So we do a lot of parent groups. We have a ton of social media, which I'll talk to you about in a sec. And we do shared projects, like we had a big sock drive in December where we all got together to try to get socks for homeless families and things like that. And we do a huge amount of motivational support. So we actually have 3 separate teams here that are beyond the school counselors and the teachers and everything else. We have the student resource specialist team, whose whole function is to identify kids. They're usually the POCs for our SAP referrals. Make those connections, get them involved. We have the entire advisory team, whose job is to get parents enrolled, get parents engaged, get students engaged. That's their function. They don't teach, they're just for engagement. And then we have the attendance specialists, who help to make sure if there is an attendance issue before it becomes a safe, or before it becomes any kind of, you know, bigger issue, they're engaging right away and saying, okay, well, what's going on? How come your kid hasn't been there? Okay, you had to make a choice this month between prescriptions and internet. And the fact is, you have a $400 overdue bill because you have a bundle and your cable and your internet are together and you couldn't pay it. So now they cut off your kid's internet. So you're not being truant. You just are dealing with COVID and you couldn't afford to pay your bill. How can we help? So I recognize you guys can't throw teams together, but if you can think about those 3 separations, think about the people responding to SAP referrals that were made and we know, the people who are there for the purpose of engagement. So sometimes your call to the parent might just be to connect, might just be to touch base. It doesn't necessarily have to be about an academic issue with your student. It can just be to say, hey, I'm reaching out to all the parents in my classroom because just want to see how you're doing. How are you all holding up? How's it going? You know, those kind of connections help to then engage them into the academic as well. And then it's not assuming that attendance is intentional. A lot of time attendance is something that is out of people's control and hands. Social media is obviously something very impactful and people like. So we do a lot with Facebook, where we use kids' faces. We intentionally have individual students because, you know, we all like to see our kids. I do. I'm like, oh, whose kid is that? You know, it gives you that kind of back and forth. Things that move. People love things that move. So, you know, if Winnie the Pooh is standing there, he's a cute Winnie the Pooh. If he's throwing snow and jumping around, you're going to get a lot more hits and a lot more people paying attention to it. And then we do other things that are, again, that engagement piece. Tuck-in Tuesdays, our elementary principal, Kelly Bernowski, holds Tuck-in Tuesdays. So she dresses up in this big giant onesie and has this, like, you know, sleep pad on her head and all this other kind of stuff. And she reads stories to the kids on Tuesdays. So we get kids who we have a hard time getting in class who show up for Tuck-in Tuesdays. But once they're there, they're talking to other kids. The parents are seeing other parents. They're feeling a little bit more comfortable. They have parents they can reach out to. One of the parent groups that I should have mentioned before that we use is we use parent mentors. So if you have some parents who are really doing well and whose children are really doing well, connect them with the parents who are struggling. Because oftentimes, you know, parent-to-parent connection is something that'll work a little bit better than the school. So some tips and tricks. Use personalized stories and engaging photos. Use GIFs or animated images because people like things that move. Use relevant cultural references to engage students. Well done and good luck there. I'm 54. I have nothing relevant or culturally relevant for teenagers at all, so I quit trying and just buy gift cards. Keep captions and text to a minimum because if you have too much, people aren't going to read it. And post consistently. Posting consistently is really impactful because if people watch it and then it changes, they want to read what it is. People scroll through their phones, they zip through things, so that differentiation oftentimes is what's engaging. So how about the kids? How do we get them going? One of the things I do want to remind everybody about, and oftentimes it's an issue we have a lot and we acknowledge and recognize in virtual, but people who are kind of new to the virtual world may not pay attention to, is it's a social performance. If you're in a Zoom room, you're in a perpetual public speaking venue, and most people hate it. Most people hate public speaking. So not only in a normal public speaking venue, you're standing on stage like this poor child and trying to speak into a microphone looking out at the audience. In a Zoom room, not only are you doing that, but you're watching yourself do that. So not only are you seeing everyone else looking at you, you're watching yourself watch everyone else looking at you. I spend half the time fixing my hair. So when you're doing this and you're thinking about, why is this kid not on camera? Why won't this kid answer? Why won't this kid do stuff? A lot of the time it's social anxiety and it's public speaking fear. So allowing them those emojis, allowing that chat feature, allowing those types of things to go on is really an effective and a helpful way to do that. Plus, you're looking at private versus public. Not everyone's comfortable with their home. Not everyone wants you to see what's behind them. Not everyone has their own room where they can go to talk on their computer, or they can share the classroom with. They may be in there with a lot of other people. So a lot of time kids close off of the video option because they just don't want you to see what's happening. When you're utilizing chat, and I don't know how your Zooms are set up or what your contracts are for whatever venue you're using, but please make sure you have an awareness of what's happening in the chat. The private versus the public is very impactful. Most BBC rooms, neuro rooms, those types of rooms, they always have the classroom chat. They have the breakout room chat, and if you can see my hands, I'm moving here. And then they have the private chat. So if I'm a student and I'm a little shy or I'm a little uncomfortable and I don't understand what's happening, I might not be willing to ask a question, especially because now I can see everybody's faces I ask it. If I'm sitting in a traditional classroom, I can only see the kids beside me, the kids behind me, the kids up front. I can't see their faces. In a Zoom, I see everybody responding to me. So that private chat option, especially for questions, is really an impactful and helpful thing to engage kids and to get them going in the SAP world, because then I can talk to them, ask them things. Think about how the camera is going to work. I suggest whiteboards versus cameras. Sometimes you get people doing things on camera you just don't want to see, and that becomes an issue. So especially in the high school, we have to think about how people are focusing there. And then for anything that might require any kind of privacy, I strongly suggest a one-on-one. And again, ask the kids the question, do you have your headset on? Can you hear me? Can other people hear me? Can people hear you? How is that going to work? What's the best way for you? And asking those types of questions to help them move forward. So that's my Moira slide. Anybody have any questions? I'll stop.
I'll jump in for a second. It's John Oster from PA Cyber. Hi, Megan.
Hey, John, how are ya?
Great. So Megan and I have known each other for quite a while. I just want to say that everything that she gave, coming from my perspective from another cyber school, is right on. Everything that you talked about today was amazing information. Great job. It's all very important. And I just wanted to reiterate so much about the camera aspect. So many of our students are in environments that, the families really wouldn't want you to see or wouldn't be comfortable with. Most of the families that are unexpectedly finding themselves in this virtual environment really didn't have the opportunity to plan. They don't have workable desks and things like that. So, I know even in our virtual environment, some of our teachers can say, well, why don't we have your camera on, or you're in that camera pilot, and they kind of forget, even from within our virtual scenarios. So just always keep that in the back of your mind. It's pretty rough to, be on the other side of that and have to use that camera. It doesn't mean that the students aren't paying attention. And in some cases they aren't, but there's always other reasons. We as educators have to think out of the box, and we usually are focused on our lessons. But you do need to be, cognizant of what's going on. So, but anyway, that's just thought I'd add that in. So thanks, Megan.
Hey, it's good to hear from you. I can put Moira back up if you guys want. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question for you. One of the biggest issues we've noticed when we are getting feedback from the teachers for the kids that are remote is the way our questionnaire asks, the different observable behaviors. It's either yes or not observed. And for remote kids, the overwhelming feedback we're getting is just not observed, which isn't the same as no. They're just not seeing it. And I feel like we're not getting an accurate picture of the needs of the kids, because it looks like there are fewer concerns than there probably really are, because it's coming up not observed all the time. How do you handle that? And what does your teacher feedback look like to get better data there?
Well, are you talking about not observed as far as things that would be relevant to SAP, or things that are more academic in nature, or both?
Things that would be relevant to SAP.
Okay. That's where the questions come in. Yeah, you really do have to be much more forward in a virtual setting than you do in a brick and mortar setting, because I can't see the child sitting in front of me in inappropriate clothing. Most of you, I'm sure, are very much aware that government housing, I don't know why, it tends to be hotter than Hades. It's always hot. So, it could be 27 degrees outside, but the kids could be sitting in there in a t-shirt and pair of shorts, and that's appropriate clothing because it's 80 degrees in their apartment. So you actually have to ask a lot more questions. Hey, how's it going? How you feeling today? If you don't, the kids will say fine because they're kids and they only say fine. You say, okay, well, let's pick an emoji, and let's pick an emoji on a slide. Are you big smile? Or are you little smile? Or where are you? Let's do some emoji. Let's do some coloring. Why don't you tell? Even the high school kids love that. They do all the high school kids. I oftentimes put up that stupid unicorn just because it's so weirdly creepy with the rainbow, unicorn thing. And get them to comment. But if you can get them to engage, you just have to ask. I mean, honestly, those yes or no questions aren't going to work. You're going to have to do more of a scale. Hey, how's it going at the house today? Anything going on that I can help you with? Hey, my door is open. If I can't help, I want to. I know right now, I got to tell you, at my house, this is our third day eating leftovers because it's getting a little tight. How's it going over there? How you guys doing? Did you make it down? Hey, I know that so-and-so was giving out some lunches. Free lunch. I'm going to free lunch. Anybody, go and get free lunch? Oh yeah, I got free lunch. You just have to be much more outward and much more forward. Unfortunately, the forms aren't going to work. You need open-ended.
I could chime in just briefly. You gave a lot of great insight as to reasons why families and students might have some difficulty with the online piece, the home settings and those kind of things. They weren't prepared for it. We as educators weren't prepared for it either. I know a lot of my colleagues had to thrash around back in March to get their houses set up. They didn't have a space or a room with their family there, so they had to make that space. But so connected to that, and it gives me a little bit of insight and food for thought, we've been doing a lot of student improvement plans for attendance. Mm-hmm. The kids don't show up in a virtual world. They're not motivated. They won't get out of bed. They love their computers for entertainment, but they don't want to use them for education, which is a great thing for public educators. I don't think we're going anywhere because they need that motivation to get up and get moving. But it was really helpful for me to hear some of the reasons why you say it's a difficult environment for pretty much everybody to get used to and to get vested in. So thank you for that.
No, sure. And the other thing, I think, brick and mortar schools need to give themselves a breather and give themselves a break in recognizing that, virtual schools, I own the computer. When you sign up for a virtual school, I'm giving you the computer. It already has our software on it. I can see if the kids have opened a second window and are playing a video game or chatting with their friends. I can shut it down and say, hey, come on back, Kyle, come on back. You have to, what are you doing? I can private message them that. So our environment virtually was created for virtual. Our curriculum was created to be online. It's not being adapted to be online. So that hurdle is already not there that you guys have really, I don't know that you're giving yourself enough credit for the amount of scrambling and what you guys have been doing. because it's really been amazing to see what people have been putting out there and the creativity that's gone on. But when you're dealing with kids that are in that environment, yeah, there's might be a really good reason they're not attending, but that lack of attendance is still a flag. So ask them, you know, hey dude, what's going on? How come you're not coming to class? You know, I miss you. I miss seeing you. Where you been? You know, what's going on at 10 o'clock at your house? Is that when, you know, dad's leaving for work and there's a lot of noise going on in the kitchen and you don't want everyone to hear it? You know, what's happening in your world at, you know, 2:30? Is that when, you know, whenever all the kids get home? Is that whenever the whistles are going off at the factory beside you? What's happening in your life at that time? You know, how can I help around that? What accommodations can I make? You know, okay, well, maybe Lindsay Knapp doesn't have to be on camera for math class at 2 o'clock, because we know Lindsay's house gets a bit chaotic at 2 o'clock. So Lindsay, I expect you to be typing. I expect to be hearing from you. I want to see you submitting stuff, but giving you a breather, honey girl, at 2, because I know your life's a little shaky then. So what can we do at these different times? You know, people are at home now. If there's little babies at home, I mean, I know at our house, and you know, a lot of the people I work with, they're bouncing babies and everything else because their caregivers aren't working, because they closed down the daycare. All this stuff's happening. So, you know, that's happening to your kids too.
Megan, could you maybe expand on that? The things that you just identified are fabulous for maybe our middle or our high school age students. But what suggestions do you have for our elementary age students that, you know, kind of by nature, they generally like school and they like to see their peers and engage with their teachers. And so while, you know, their lack of logging on is a flag, it's difficult to communicate with those younger students, and then, you know, trying to even communicate with family members or, you know, their guardians can also be a challenge, because you're getting excuses or comments and things aren't being followed through. So, you know, how might you suggest teachers try and navigate that, you know, when we're seeing, well, I'm concerned about these students, but I'm not getting, it's even very difficult to communicate with the families to try and even identify, how can we help you?
And that's very common. And again, recognizing that the parents didn't sign up for this, you know, and perfect example, my husband just got home from work. He was standing behind my computer making faces at me. So I made it very challenging for me to keep this flat screen. Maybe have that going on. But the reality is, in a virtual, if they sign up for a virtual school, then that's what they bought into. But at the elementary level, we need a lot of interaction. Kids are desperate for that social at any point. I'm desperate for it. But allowing that whiteboard, allowing that time for them to get on there and color, to show things, to put things up on the screen, to do those kind of things, that physical engagement is really impactful for especially the early elementary, but all the elementary kids. So making sure that you're starting off with that physical engagement, and then recognizing when if the parents aren't there to help them, or the parents can't be there to help them, which is the other thing. You can't assume they won't. It might be that they can't be there to help them. It's going to be almost impossible. So you're looking at maybe shorter lessons, maybe screenshotting their pictures, screenshotting their work, sending things in that way, because I can screenshot it off my phone and send it to you if I have one computer and that's the only thing I have because the baby spilled formula on the other computer and that we're all working off of one. And then multiple venues for communication. You're going to need to email, call, snail mail. Text is huge. Facebook Message. I mean, whatever you have to do to get in touch with those families, because that's what you might find out. I mean, I can give you an example. I had a family that had 4 kids, 1 in middle school, 2 higher elementary, and 1 kindergarten. And the kindergartner and the 3rd grader did nothing. The middle school kid was amazing. I mean, she was doing a great job. The other 2 weren't doing anything. And, you know, I was getting really annoyed, and I was trying to get a hold of mom. Mom wasn't answering. I couldn't get anybody to respond. So I cyber stalked the middle schooler in the class. And I said, you know what, hey, honey, I know you're in class. I'm sorry to bother you, but I really need to talk to your parent because I'm worried about your sister and brother. I need that time. So I pulled her into a breakout room privately, obviously, and asked her this question. And she said, you know what? My mom is working right now. She works every morning, all morning. She's trying to get the little ones online, but that's when she's at work. That's when she's also trying to work to feed us and to have rent. So the fact is, she just can't do that. She just can't get it going. So one of the responses we had was valid, get it. If my choice is, getting the kid online or food, I'm going with food. So let's talk about who's in your family. Let's talk about who's in your neighborhood. Let's talk about who's in your apartment complex. Is there anybody else who has kids? Anybody else who's in our school? Anybody else who's doing this? Maybe we can do a trade. Would ask your mom if she's okay if we have permission to reach out to somebody else and see if maybe they can take your sister and brother in the morning and you can have them in the afternoon, or if we can trade it off. The other thing we noticed is that middle schooler did not do work in the afternoon. It was because she was watching the baby, because mom had to be on a headset. She was doing data input for a hospital on the phone, so she couldn't pay attention. So she had to do that. These are COVID realities. These are real realities. I mean, you have this anyway, but these are also COVID realities, and our families are dealing with things that are difficult. So to be perfectly blunt, if it's an elementary kid and they don't have help and support, it's not going to happen. So the issue is, how do you get them that help and support? If they can't have it in the house, how do you connect them with somebody else? How do you work around things and say, okay, 8th grade school student, you're a stellar student. I don't want to see you fall behind either. What do we need to do to help you? How do we help with this and make those connections? Did that help?
It did. Thank you.
Sure.
I'd like to ask and kind of pick your brain a little bit about some of the secondary students. One of the biggest issues that a large population of our kids that are struggling are reporting is just that lack of structure, lack of accountability. I mean, our classes are synchronous, they're supposed to be getting up at the same time and logging on, but they're just not, because they're not separating, home is where I sleep and relax, school is where I work, and all of a sudden now I'm in the same place and I have to do both things and pay attention to the time. There, a lot of the older, secondary level students are really struggling with that boundary, that accountability, and having to hold themselves. It's almost like they're with college level expectations for time management and things, but they're still in school. Have you guys in the virtual environment learned any tricks of the trade that could help our kids with that?
Yeah, so you guys have human children. Yeah, they kind of want to stay in bed and not get up. Yeah, I have those too. One of the things, robocalls, people hate them. So you could do a robocall for every 9th grader at 5 minutes or 10 minutes before school, and it's going to buzz and it's going to ring. So even if they have their phone off, if it's going to mom, it's going to dad, and it's going to them, somebody's getting a call. And that'll just do that as an automatic, hey, welcome, wake up, it's time to get up. We do a lot of incentives. I don't know, kids, high school and middle school kids seem to plots over earbuds. So we do things that are incentivizing, hey, every time you show up for this class, you pop in at this time, you get this many points, we're doing a draw, we're giving out earbuds. So incentive programs tend to help with that. But I have to tell you what we found, especially with COVID, is the kids are desperate for interactions with each other. They really miss each other. They really miss their friends. They miss seeing each other. They miss that. So we oftentimes do a home room. Now it's controlled. Obviously, I can drop the camera. I can drop the chat. But we do a home room meet and greet. So if you come at, I'm going to pick a time, 8 o'clock, first 10 minutes are for you just to say hi to everybody. It's for you guys to have a chance to interact, for you to get there. Because if they wake up, they're probably in their bed, to be honest with you. But if they wake up enough to at least get on, because they know that's the only time they're going to get to talk to so-and-so who they haven't seen because they're not in chem anymore together, it's an incentive to get up. And then once they're there, it's a lot easier to keep going. It's that initial getting up. The other problem is your computers aren't designed to have control by the school. So consequently, it's real easy to put up this Zoom room and minimize it and put up, 100 other things that are going on. So it's more of a challenge to constantly be interacting. Okay, I'd say we tend to do a 5-minute top arena. So if I'm talking for 5 minutes, then there's an immediate response. Okay, everybody, I need to see a thumbs up. I need to see something. Hey, hey, Jenny, why don't I see a thumbs up? Where's Jenny? Jenny, what's going on, Jenny? And then even if Jenny, hi, but I mean, even if Jenny's ignoring me, their friends are texting, hey, Miss B's calling you. You better call out. You better put the, and then you put the, you bring them back. So you can use some of that peer pressure to do it. But, it's that time interval of constantly having them do something physically. That physical interaction on the computer is really important. And earbuds, they love them. Chipotle delivers where I live too. Sometimes Chipotle card, you can get DoorDash for Chipotle. Yeah. Anybody else? Anybody have any suggestions that really worked for them? Anything that you guys are doing that maybe was a great idea that was really supportive, or you guys got a great reaction for? Tough crowd, been talking a long time with no physical interactions. Need a thumbs up, need a thumbs up. A lot of people off camera, not a lot of emojis going here. There you go, Pam gave you a thumbs up. Well done. Well, thank you guys so much for, thank you, Lori. Appreciate it. What I just did, thank you, Lori. Hey, Pam's in, there she is. Oh, there's Carrie, she gave me a little, cheers thing. Gets everybody going, and then they're gonna text each other and say, oh, Susan gave me a clap. Who didn't do what? People like to hear their names, they like to be called out. So, thank you guys.
Megan, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your insight, based on your experiences. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And we hope to see you at our other events. And you will find in your email later in the week, the recording, the PowerPoint, and the evaluation. So have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Bye. Thank you.
All right, I'm off to Pilates.